Richard Gere, the timeless Hollywood icon whose gentle smile and quiet charisma shaped an entire generation of cinema, has just confirmed something at 76 years old that fans have whispered about for decades. For years, people speculated, questioned, and wondered what truly happened behind the calm, centered exterior he always presented to the world. And now, after a lifetime of silence, Gere has finally spoken. That it happened during a rare, intimate interview, one of the few he has agreed to in recent years. Richard Gere, known for guarding his private life with almost sacred devotion, seemed different this time, more reflective, more vulnerable, almost as if he had been waiting for this moment. And when he finally revealed the truth, it left fans stunned. For years, people suspected that the pressures of fame, the intense scrutiny, and the emotional toll of being Hollywood's peaceful leading man had weighed heavily on him. They suspected that behind the calm exterior was a man quietly battling, far more than the public ever realized. And at 76, Richard Gere confirmed that those suspicions were not only true but deeper than anyone imagined. He admitted that the cost of fame was far greater than he ever let on, that the peace he sought in Buddhism and meditation wasn't just a hobby, but a lifeline. He confessed that the gentleness people admired was born from pain he could never fully articulate. And he revealed the one truth he spent years keeping to himself, one that completely reframes how fans see him today. And now, as his words echo across Hollywood, people are saying the same thing. We knew something was hidden, but we never expected this. Richard Gere sat in a quiet corner of his home in upstate New York, surrounded by warm light, wooden floors, and years of memories that lined the walls. It was a rare moment, an interview he didn't have to give when he easily could have declined. But at 76, something inside him had shifted. He wasn't there to promote a new movie or discuss a Hollywood cause. This time, he simply wanted to tell the truth, his truth. And as he started speaking, it became clear that the story he'd held inside for decades was far more emotional than anyone expected. He began by reflecting on his early years in Hollywood, when charisma and youth overshadowed everything else. Studios saw him as a heartthrob, a leading man with a mysterious edge. Women adored him, tabloids chased him, and directors wanted him for roles that required intensity, but always the same type of charm. The public loved that version of Richard Gere, but they didn't know the price he was paying behind closed doors. Gere admitted that from the start. He struggled with the weight of expectations. People think you're confident because you're on a screen 30 feet tall, he said softly. But inside, I was just a kid pretending to be someone stronger. The revelation surprised even those who followed his career closely. After all, Richard Gere's presence had always seemed effortlessly calm, almost spiritual. But that calm wasn't natural, it was learned, practiced, and desperately needed. In his 30s, as fame intensified, Gere found himself suffocating under the spotlight. The media frenzy surrounding American Gigolo and later Pretty Woman turned him into an international symbol, something he never wanted to be. He confessed that the attention brought loneliness, and the loneliness brought anxiety, something he hid from everyone except a few close friends. You start realizing people love the character, not you, he said. And once that line blurs, you lose yourself. That loss pushed him towards spiritual exploration. Buddhism wasn't a trend or a side interest, as so many assumed. It was a lifeline. Gere revealed that meditation was the only thing that kept him grounded during the years when fame felt like a hurricane he couldn't escape. He sought teachers, mentors, and long stretches of solitude, not because he was Hollywood's peaceful star, but because he was struggling to hold himself together. As he spoke, there was a vulnerability in his tone that felt unfamiliar yet deeply authentic. Gere explained that he often felt misunderstood, not just by the public, but by the industry itself. Directors wanted him to play seductive, mysterious men, even as he longed for roles with emotional depth and quiet humanity. But Hollywood didn't want the gentle Richard Gere. They wanted the persona. And then came the revelation that stopped the room cold. For decades, fans and insiders suspected that Gere stepped back from Hollywood by choice, that he preferred a quiet life, that he simply outgrew the industry. But at 76, he finally admitted that wasn't the full truth. It wasn't that I walked away, he said. It was that I couldn't stay. He revealed that he faced growing pressure, stereotypes, and limitations that slowly drained his passion. The roles offered to him no longer aligned with who he was becoming, and the constant microscope of fame magnified every personal struggle he tried to hide. I hit a point where the man I was pretending to be, and the man I truly was, couldn't exist together anymore. He paused, then added, "So I chose peace over fame. And that choice saved my life, for the first time." Richard Gere openly acknowledged what many long suspected, that behind the calm spiritual exterior was a man fighting quietly to protect his sanity, his heart, and his identity. And this was only the beginning of the truth he was finally ready to reveal. Richard Gere leaned back, his eyes drifting toward the window as if replaying a lifetime of scenes. The nature outside calm, steady, untouched mirrored the life he spent years trying to build. And as he continued speaking, the truths he shared became even more personal. He admitted that one of the hardest phases of his life came at the peak of his fame. Hollywood painted his life as glamorous, exciting, enviable, but behind the scenes, Gere was dealing with emotional exhaustion that fame only made worse. He confessed that he spent years feeling like he was living inside a role he hadn't chosen. "You play a character so long," he said quietly, "that sometimes you forget how to be yourself." The pressure to maintain that image weighed heavily on him, especially during the era when tabloids ruled the entertainment world. Rumors, scandals, fabricated stories, Gere faced them all. And even at 76, he admitted the wounds from that era have never fully healed. "People think you grow thick skin," he said, "but some things cut deeper than anyone realizes." Much of the public assumed his retreat from Hollywood was tied to aging, shifting priorities, or simply wanting a quieter life. But Gere revealed there was another, more painful reason. The industry itself had changed in ways that left him feeling alienated. He watched as Hollywood became driven by franchises, box office numbers, and fast turnaround production schedules. The meaningful, character-driven stories he loved were being replaced by spectacle. The type of films that shaped me, that shaped generations, they were disappearing, he said. And with them, the kind of actor I was raised to be. It wasn't bitterness, his tone carried more sadness than frustration. He loved acting. He loved storytelling. But he no longer recognized the place he had once called home. Offers became fewer, and the ones he did receive felt hollow, lacking the emotional truth he valued. It was easier to step back than to compromise, however. The public didn't know that walking away came with its own emotional toll. Gere confessed that the silence, after decades of noise, was both a relief and a burden. When the world stops watching, he reflected, you're forced to confront the parts of yourself you've been ignoring. And that confrontation brought him face to face with what he now describes as the most difficult period of his life. Gere revealed that during those quieter years, he experienced profound loneliness, something he had successfully hidden for most of his career. Even surrounded by admirers, co-workers, and fans, he often felt isolated, unsure who genuinely knew him. "Fame gives you attention," he said, "but attention is not love." He remembered nights on movie sets where he felt utterly alone, despite being surrounded by hundreds of people. And when work slowed, the silence of his home felt even louder. Meditation helped, but it wasn't enough. He knew he needed something deeper: connection, authenticity, and a sense of purpose beyond performance. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, his life changed. Gere revealed that a single conversation with someone close to him, someone he refuses to name, made him reconsider everything. That person asked him a simple but life-altering question: when was the last time you felt truly alive? The answer shocked him. It wasn't on a film set, he said. It wasn't in front of a camera or on a red carpet. It was during a quiet moment, holding my son. That moment reshaped his priorities. Family, he realized, was the one place he could be Richard, not the heartthrob, not the Hollywood icon, not the misunderstood star. Just a man, flawed and human, trying to live honestly. As a father, he found the emotional grounding he had been missing for decades, and he acknowledged that becoming a parent later in life gave him a perspective he wishes he had much earlier. "You start asking different questions," he said, "about love, about legacy, about who you really are. But even with this newfound clarity, Gere wasn't done revealing the truths he'd kept inside for so long. There was still one secret one the public had speculated about for years, that he was finally ready to address, and it was far more shocking than anyone expected. Richard. Gere paused for a long moment before continuing, as though weighing which truth to reveal next. His expression shifted more serious, heavier, as if the next words carried years of unspoken weight. When he some were harmless, others were hurtful, and a few followed him for decades, twisting public perception and leaving him misunderstood. Gere admitted that he often stayed silent, not because the rumors were true, but because he believed responding would only make things worse. In Hollywood, denial becomes confirmation, he said, and truth gets buried under noise. But what people never realized was how deeply these fabrications affected him. He revealed that some false stories nearly cost him roles, friendships, and even personal relationships. When the world turns you into a meme, a joke, or a headline, he said, you start questioning who you are outside of all that. One rumor in particular haunted him for years, persistent, damaging, and completely untrue. He didn't name it directly, but anyone who followed pop culture in the 90s knew exactly what he meant. Gere said it became so overwhelming that it changed the trajectory of his career. Directors hesitated, studios worried, and suddenly, one of Hollywood's biggest stars found himself having to navigate rooms where people whispered more about fiction than talent. It was humiliating, he admitted, not because I cared what strangers thought, but because it made people forget the work I dedicated my life to. But what he said next revealed something even deeper. During that difficult period, Gere realized he had been defining himself through fame for too long. The applause, the movie premieres, the iconic roles, they had shaped him, consumed him, and blinded him to the fact that he was losing pieces of his true self along the way. I didn't know who I was without the spotlight, he confessed. I didn't know how to be Richard without being Richard Gere. He described the internal battle that followed, a conflict between the desire to keep performing and the need to reclaim his humanity. For a while, he tried to find balance, but the industry was relentless. Every comeback attempt came with shadows from the past. Every interview led to questions he didn't want to answer. Every new project felt like walking through a field of landmines. It wasn't age that pushed him away, it was exhaustion. So, he did something few actors of his status ever dared to do. He stepped away completely. He bought land far from Hollywood. He spent weeks without touching a script. He devoted time to Buddhist study, meditation, and silence. I needed to unlearn fame, he said. I needed to hear my own thoughts again. But the most surprising revelation came when he spoke about what he discovered. During that time away, I realized I'd spent decades avoiding my own vulnerability. Gere said, I thought strength meant being untouchable, but real strength comes from admitting you're human. This admission opened the door to healing emotionally, spiritually, and personally. Gere explained that he learned how to be present, how to embrace imperfections, and how to let go of the expectations the world placed on him. He also began rebuilding relationships he had neglected, finding comfort in simplicity rather than spotlight. And then, he shared a truth few people knew. During his self-imposed exile, Gere wrote hundreds of pages, journals, letters to himself, reflections, even unfinished scripts. But what he discovered in those writings changed everything. I found a version of myself I didn't recognize, he said. Not the star, not the icon, just a man who wanted peace. He realized that the public's assumptions about him were far from reality. The truth he had withheld for years was not scandalous or dramatic, it was profoundly human. His greatest battle had always been with himself. And as he prepared to share the final piece of his long-hidden truth, Gere hinted that what comes next would explain everything: the retreat from Hollywood, the silence, and the transformation that shocked even those closest to him. Richard. Gere took a deep breath before delivering the truth he had carried for decades, the truth that would finally explain everything fans had sensed, questioned, and suspected. His expression softened, almost peaceful, as if release had finally come. At some point, he said quietly, I realized the life I was living wasn't the life I truly wanted. It was the life fame demanded of me. For years, people assumed Gere stepped back from Hollywood because he had grown older, or because he preferred activism, or because the industry had moved on. But none of those explanations captured the full truth. The real reason was far more personal, more emotional, and more deeply rooted in the quiet parts of his soul. Gere revealed that throughout his career, he lived with a constant internal conflict, a desire to tell meaningful stories, and an equally strong desire to escape the machine that produced them. He loved acting, but not the fame, not the scrutiny, not the endless noise. The push and pull left him emotionally drained. "People think actors need the spotlight," he said, "but I never did. I just needed the work, the craft, the humanity." When the industry became more competitive, louder, and dominated by blockbuster culture, he felt himself slipping further away from the type of roles that gave him purpose. Studios wanted formulas, not truth, and Richard Gere has always been an actor who chases truth. But the most heartbreaking confession came when he finally explained the moment he knew he had to walk away. "It was when I looked in the mirror," he said, "and didn't recognize the person looking back." The constant pressure to meet expectations, physical, emotional, professional, had taken a toll. Gere admitted that he felt himself becoming someone he didn't want to be: guarded, anxious, disconnected. He felt numb in a world that demanded constant feeling. "I wasn't living, I was performing," he said, "and I didn't want my life to be just another role." So he made the decision that shocked Hollywood but saved his peace. He stepped away, not as a star, but as a man reclaiming his identity. What came next, however, was something he never expected. Away from the cameras, away from scripts, premieres, and interviews, Richard Gere experienced something he called the quiet awakening. For the first time in decades, he felt free to explore, free to breathe, free to be present. He reconnected with nature, spent time alone, and allowed himself to feel everything he had suppressed for years. "It was painful at first," he admitted, "but the silence taught me who I really was." And that discovery brought him to the truth fans had long suspected. Gere had always been searching for peace, for meaning, for purpose deeper than fame. His spiritual journey wasn't a celebrity trend. It wasn't a phase. It wasn't a persona. It was survival. "Meditation didn't make me calm," he said. "It reminded me that I was allowed to be human." Through Buddhism, he found stillness. Through activism, he found purpose. Through family, he found love rooted not in expectation, but in authenticity. But even after all of this, Gere confessed that he still struggled with the fear that people misunderstood him. For years, he felt seen only as a character instead of a person. But now, at 76, he's finally made peace with that. "You can't control how the world sees you," he said with a gentle smile. "You can only choose how you see yourself." In the final moments of the interview, Gere shared one last, powerful message, one that answered the question fans had carried for years. "I didn't disappear because I was done with Hollywood," he said. "I disappeared because I finally realized I didn't need Hollywood to feel alive." With that single sentence, the truth became clear. The man the world believed was retreating was actually awakening. The silence wasn't an ending, it was a new beginning. And at 76, Richard Gere stands where he always wanted to be, not in front of a camera, but in the center of a life built on honesty, peace, and the freedom to finally be himself.